what's going on, guys? I'm Chris, and this is Regular Guy Training. So, today is the review on the 509T and its Acss variant that uses like the Vulcan reticle and that kind of thing. So, I've been reviewing this. I've had it mounted to guns and that kind of stuff for a little over a year now. And frankly, this is a really good example as to why these reviews take 1,000 years to actually do. Because when you long-term test something, when it's used a lot, when it's brought out to different classes, brought out to different weather conditions and that kind of thing, you start to see some stuff. Because, look, we all know this, okay? When you see reviews of products like this, especially when it's closed emitter, guys get really excited, myself included. And when they first start to use it, they get really excited, right? I did too. But the reason why when I'm testing a product, I don't full house just recommend it right out the gate is because I have to test it long enough and in different enough weather conditions to see if it really is worth its salt. Now, let's go ahead and talk about a couple of things. And what this really turns into is a sum of its total parts, because the good is exactly this. I mean, it's a closed emitter optic. Its turrets are accurate for what their measurements say that they are. I like circle dot reticles, even though I'm a fan of circle only reticles from Holosun and that kind of thing. I like that you can drop it to dot only, because if you're using it for night vision and that kind of stuff, it's really important, because the circle around the dot is too tight and it gets really busy if you were to try that under night vision. But that's pretty easy to basically figure out, right? The boxy nature of it and the right angular-ish nature of the box actually makes it really easy to snatch up and put on target and that kind of thing. And like I had previously said with the Vulcan review, people perceive right angles a little bit better, a little bit faster than rounded edges, right? So it's really easy to line up, get straight and that kind of thing. And I personally prefer the circle dot reticle over the Vulcan, over just like little personal preferences and that kind of thing. However, there are a few issues that you run into when you do this. Number one, and I'm going to start cycling images here as we go, but number one, the 509 and its Vulcan reticle variant are not the same optic size. The Vulcan is actually a little bit larger. So if you already have a 509 and you have your gun cut for it, right, and then you go get the Vulcan, you'll recognize that it doesn't fit in that cut unless you start with the larger optic and then go down a size. So that's an issue. Why exactly that is, I don't exactly know, but regardless to what engineering problems needed to be solved in order to make that work, it does cause a couple of problems. Okay. Here's the thing as well. These guys ship with like adapter plates for RMR cut guns. I have several issues with these plates. Number one, they're real thick, probably cast stuff, because if you have something out of like something made out of like forged steel or whatever, that tends to be significantly thinner. So they're large plates. So if you already have a set of suppressor height sights, for instance, for a gun that was cut for an RMR, or in this case a 507, I think this was actually cut for an RMR. My P10C is cut for a 507. Either way, it doesn't matter. Both of those optics interchange. But the thing is that if you already have a set of suppressor height sights that line up with that optic, and then you throw this adapter plate on there, it's just barely too tall enough to the point where you can't use those sights at all, right? Now, obviously, if you throw an adapter plate into a slide that's cut for a different optic, it's going to sit a little higher. But if these present halfway up into the glass, a third of the way up into the glass, and then I get like a thinner piece of, for instance, forged steel in there, rather than a really thick cast plate, I'll be able to barely see those irons. I have something I can use versus nothing at all, because the top edge of that optic lines up with the bottom edge of the 509's glass lines up with the very, very top of the rear sight. So you kind of can't use it at all. It's not even in view. So that wouldn't be as big of an issue to me if it weren't for the fact that not all of these plates are the same. And here's how I come to this conclusion, right? The first plate that I got with the 509, I had some forward and back movement on the plate itself. Like once you mounted the optic to the plate, it would shift back and forth. It would move a bit. So I'm sitting there like kind of pissed, but you know, you get a second plate and that one works, right? Then Dimitri sends the 509-ish optic with the Vulcan reticle on it, and that one is really, really hard to get it mounted to it. It's very tight, like you have to basically beat it in there. So at that point, it's very clear that not all of these are machined the same. The QC isn't there on these plates, right? Now, I've had to do a little bit of screw work in order to make this work. That's not really a big deal, especially, again, if you have, you know, a gun cut or a slide cut for a particular optic and then you mount something else on there. You might have to bust out a Dremel for your screws. That's not really an issue to me. But the issue that I do have is that the plates themselves are very poorly coated. What that turns into is a rust issue, and what I really would just rather not have is the thing mounting my optic to a slide rusting. Okay, whether it be just being out in the rain or I'm sweating on it a lot, I don't need the plate that's carrying or mounting my optic to my slide to begin to rust, because as rust starts to build, especially underneath between the slide itself and the actual plate, this stuff that you can't get to unless you're regularly dismounting your handgun. And if you carry the thing, that's sort of an issue, right? Because I have to pull the mount off the plate, then the plate off the slide. It virtually guarantees, especially with the differences in how the plates are made. And when you start removing rust material, stuff is going to move around a bit, so you have to make sure that that gun is zeroed. And every time I've mounted everything back together, there was a little bit of zero shift at 25, which is sort of a big deal, considering 25 is really fucking close, okay? So there's that issue with the plates. And now the real issue, okay? I'm gonna, again, more images are gonna cycle. This is between my optic, and then the next one's gonna come up with a student's optic. Right, now these are images that I personally snapped. The first time I saw this, I just sort of let it go. I figured it was like a one-off kind of deal and whatnot, and that's not really a big deal. But now this is the third time I've seen this, because the one I didn't take a picture of, the second one that I did take a picture of, and then the third, mine. Okay, mine, the one where you see dried almost all the way water on the inside of it. What you can't see is that there's still a little bit of water particulate inside the glass, right? The issue with that, obviously, is that the whole fucking point of a closed emitter optic is to protect that junk from wet things falling from the sky. But it doesn't do that. Not in a uniform sense anyway, because I've seen a lot of these optics do just fine. But obviously, there's a percentage that have bad seals, and I think particularly this revolves around the battery tray. I think that little rubberized seal in there is not as good across the board, whether it's how it's cut or how it interfaces with the battery compartment or whatever. It doesn't really matter. The point is that if you pull the battery tray and put it in there, there's a chance that your seal's gone when it starts to rain heavy and you're outside. And again, the whole point of a closed emitter optic is so specifically you can go do that without anything interfering with your emitter, right? Like the issues that we have with optics like this are that if it rains hard, we have to shoot through the Milky Way galaxy and deal with our issues. You know, if I'm using a circle-only reticle, I basically have to go to a dot-only because I recognize that I'm going to have some speckledy nonsense going on in there. Same thing with RMRs or anything else with an open emitter, you know, for emitting the reticle. So that's an issue, because now I can't do anything about what's inside the closed emitter, like inside the housing for the closed emitter. Okay, at least with this, and stuff gets wet, and then the rain stops finally, I can go in there with a shirt and I can dry stuff off, and, you know, that doesn't always fix the problem the whole way, but it's cleaner than it was a second ago. Without the ability to do that on a closed emitter optic that's got a bad seal, right, I don't have that ability anymore. So that's the issue that I'm running into more than anything else. And this isn't a one-time thing. This isn't a two-time thing. This is a three-time thing. Okay? And as time goes on, I'm hearing from different people here and there, usually through like email exchanges and that kind of stuff. It's like, hey, my friggin' Holosun did this, blah, blah, blah. So the more I go on, the more I hear about this a little bit more. So it's not the most unknown thing ever. Again, which is why these reviews take as long as they do, and it's why you study this stuff and you pull data points, and you don't attach your heart and soul to a piece of equipment too terribly hard, because if it doesn't work, if something's wrong, something's wrong. Now, obviously, I can send this back to Holosun, and they can send me back a new optic, and maybe I get a good seal on a battery tray. I guess. I don't know what's causing necessarily, moisture to get inside and humidify the inside of my closed emitter optic, right? But something is, and I'm assuming that that's where the fault really lies there, okay? And if you think about it, that's really the only inlet that you could have, because again, if you have an optic like this, there is a plate sealing the underside, and then that underside gets bolted down into a slide. Or if you got an RMR with a little protector plate underneath it so that that whole bottom side is protected, and then bolt all that crap down, you have seals in place to prevent outside junk from messing with, your batteries or whatever else, right? Now, I've seen everything fail in the past before, right? Everything that's good can break, but when you start to run stats up on stuff that fails exactly at what it was made to do, that's when it cocks an eyebrow for me. Now, I'm not saying that Holosun can't fix this, because they tend to be iterative in how they make changes to particular optics and battery styles and all this other shit, to the point where a lot of times you can't keep up with their variants, okay? But right now, I'm going to recommend this optic to nobody. Right now, I'm going to tell people, get a 507 or their RMR clones, basically, that don't have the U shape but the regular boxy shape, because I haven't seen this kind of crap from their open emitter optics. I haven't seen this kind of stuff unless it's very, very heavily, badly beaten to death RMRs, right? I haven't seen them fail in this way unless there's a lot of bullets on that optic riding on that slide. I've seen weird stuff out of the Steiner closed emitter optic, where there's like screws and shit floating around on the inside of it. That makes no sense to me. The only closed emitter variant I've seen that didn't have really weird stuff happening to it, other than people complaining about the battery life, which at this point I'll just take, is the aim point. So what I'm going to say is this: if you don't want to go to the aim point thing, and you already have an open emitter optic that's good, that you've used for a while, I wouldn't recommend making that switch, right? And if you want to go in that direction, just go with the aim point, because here's the thing as well. You guys seen a bunch of night vision footage and that kind of stuff. I did notice that between the aim point and the 509, even if everything's all good, okay, the glass on the aim point is a little better. It's a little clearer. It's easier to see the contrast over there, and there isn't the haze between my lens, and lens. Okay? And obviously, if I have a bunch of moisture and nonsense I can't get out of my optic, then that's going to cloud what's going on in the background of my target if I'm skinning out a pistol with night vision over the front of my head. Yeah, really niche, but at the same time, guys that do that kind of stuff and do that a lot should note this as well. So, I don't really have anything much else. I hate that I have to make a review like this, but the data is the data, and right now, it's kind of like PSA AKs. Right when you're really, really, excited and ready to tell people all about how great it is, some stupid nonsense happens, and then it repeats itself, and you gotta be like, all right, now I gotta back up and wait until the issues get fixed. And that's basically where I'm at on this. So, that said, guys, if you guys want to support us through Patreon, check us out on Facebook. Come out and train with us, because we got classes that I'm starting to put on the schedule more and more now, getting ready to, hit the places that I normally hit, like Georgia, Mississippi, going back to Ohio in November, doing more stuff here, that kind of thing. Links for all this stuff are in the description below, and if you want to get something out of the whole Patreon support thing, $41 a month gets you as much training as you want with us, as long as it's not a private class, because it makes economical sense. And vehicle stuff because that makes economical sense. The stuff costs things. We have to buy the vehicles and then have, well, we have to pay for the delivery of the vehicles and then have them trotted off, and that's, you know, if I just have a whole bunch of gym membership guys come in, that wouldn't make too much sense. But other than that, there you go. Also, yeah, I do private classes. Just my contact information for that kind of stuff is on the website. It's easy to find. It's whatever. So if you want to work something out, especially in groups, there's another way to contact and do classes and that kind of stuff. So all that said, all the plugs done. Remember, a regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Easy.